Alright, guys. Welcome back to the pod, back to Theory and Theology. Alright, so we're gonna talk about this ABC model and CBT and this Dolores Cannon theory surrounding, working towards improving different patterns in our lives that we need to form more accuracy around, and how we kind of cope with things in life. And so I talked about this ABC model. I found a worksheet that I've seen before, I think, but I'm a little rusty on my CBT. So you can find different types of psychology worksheets at therapistaid.com. There's a lot of free ones. And so I did misspeak in the previous episode when I said ABC. I was correct about activating event, but the B is actually beliefs, not necessarily behavior. I think I got confused because CBT is cognitive behavior therapy. So it's activating events, beliefs, consequences, and then it goes into what says D and E, so disputation of beliefs, and then effective new beliefs. So that's A, B, C, and then D and E. So the A is activating event. It says something happens, or let me back up. Something happens to you or in the environment around you. Beliefs for B. You have a belief or interpretation regarding the activating event. C. Consequences. Your belief has consequences that include feelings and behaviors. That's where the behaviors come in. And then D, which we didn't talk about D and E before, but D is disputations of beliefs, which is challenge your beliefs to create new consequences. So challenge your beliefs to create new feelings or behaviors. And then effective new beliefs, which is E. Effective new beliefs is adoption and implementation of new adaptive beliefs. So basically, you're trying to get to a point where you believe differently on something, and these are core beliefs a lot of times. So if you kind of practice that technique of peeling the onion, like, what if this happens, then what does that mean? And then if that happens, then what's this next layer under that? What does that mean? If you're talking core beliefs, that can take a while to kind of determine like what a core belief is. So I'm going to use an example. So basically, I don't know if this isn't really a pattern. Maybe part of it's a pattern, but it's not fully a pattern. I just have something that was on my mind this morning that I was kind of reflecting on while I was driving around, and I kind of liked where the thoughts were going with it, with dissecting it, and I wanted to talk about it more. So basically, I had this activating event happen. It was something that happened to me or in the environment around me. So not that long ago, I was with friends, and I am at this bar, and we're hanging out, and one of my friends is kind of like unhinged at this moment at this bar, and kind of like being annoying towards other people. And they're never usually this way, but some strange reason this day, we had things going on. And so I start talking to a friend, and I'm talking about this person that I met, that I have this crush on this person, And I was a little bit stressed out because I felt like they were kind of like trying to challenge me on it, like kind of like well, you never like kind of like judging like the way that I maybe date people or approach people that I like. They're kind of like pointing it out, kind of like maybe like a sensitive issue, and they're kind of like, well, you never follow through, or like kind of whatever they were trying to say. And I was pretty irritated by that. I mean, that was my belief, was that my belief or the interpretation of what made me start becoming more stressed out or activated was that somebody was judging me, and they were trying to put me down. And so that led to a consequence, uh, which is my beliefs, uh, that are consequences that include feelings and behaviors. So the feelings that I felt were kind of like, I was irritated. I wouldn't go as far to say as angry. I wasn't like super hurt by it, but I wouldn't say I was pleased or happy. I was, not happy, um, but slightly annoyed, maybe irritated, annoyed, and that, because of that, I ended up having the behavior of kind of, continuing to talk about, you know, maybe like exaggerating. I don't know. It wasn't really an exaggeration, because it was really how I felt, but in reality, it wasn't gonna happen that way. So I was kind of explaining like, I really want to move in with this person, and have like a life together with this person. And at that time, I was into this person, this crush, enough that that was realistic. But what happened was, in the background, I had a couple other friends overhear what I was talking about, and they kind of came in late to the conversation and were kind of like assuming that I meant something that I didn't really say, which I kind of allowed that to happen because I thought it would just blow over. Because we're, when sometimes, for people who maybe don't go to bars, sometimes when you're out at a bar, you're just kind of like there, and like you'll be talking about something, but it's like, I mean, sometimes it's not really a real in-depth conversation with like a lot of like authenticity to it. Sometimes it's more of like an ego kind of display conversation, and I was kind of coming at this from more of a perspective of ego, of kind of like, yeah, I found this person that I really like and I want to date them, and I think we're gonna maybe like, I'll try to like approach them about getting a spot together, and like I'm really into them, and I think things are going really well. But the reality of what was happening is, I had gone on some dates with this person. I was really into this person. They were really into me, but we weren't like an official couple. But from that point, it turned into this whole interpretation by some of my other friends that were overhearing that I am in this committed relationship with a person that I have a crush on, and I'm considering moving in with this person. Now, I was not talking to these other people. I was talking to this one person, but I was talking enough and saying enough and mentioning enough that I think the other friends kind of thought that I was like really involved seriously with the person. But I knew that the person I was kind of BSing with, I knew that we were just kind of back and forth, just kind of this like banter, and like they were just kind of like trying to get under my skin, and I was just like, well, let me keep this person entertained so that they're not like annoying everybody else, because previously they had been annoying everybody else. So I was like, well, at least I have their attention, and we're kind of in this back and forth conversation. But I didn't really know other people were like overhearing me, and so my other friends, being the nice friends that they are, they start to congratulate me, and they're like, oh, like, I'm really happy for you, like, congratulations. And I'm like, okay, thanks. And I thought that would be the end of it, right? But what happened is later on, whenever I kept seeing these other friends, they kept kind of mentioning, like, hey, like, why don't you invite that person? You know, why don't you invite this person? And then I did invite them, but I kept not inviting them. Um, like, they weren't going to show up anyways, but it's like, I did invite them to quite a few interacting events after that fact, because I was into this person, and we had gone out on some dates, but we weren't a solid couple, if that makes sense. Like, and you know, you don't have to be like in an exclusive, you know, monogamous relationship for things to be considered a couple. And you know, when I date people, I'm not always like in an exclusive monogamous situation, but it's like we weren't having that conversation of like, hey, like, you know, what are we, kind of thing. Like, you know, we were still pretty much friends, but we both liked each other and we're friends, and we get along and we're friends. So it's kind of like we're friends, you know, we're not a couple, you know. And so that was one layer, and another layer on top of that was when I kept seeing my other friends, you know, they because they would host events a lot, like at their house, or like they were the ones who were like the party planner type people. So either at their house they would host events, or like we would make plans to meet up at certain places. And you know, I started realizing they really wanted to meet this person. And then one day one of my friends is like, oh, like, it's okay if you're not comfortable. And I was kind of like, you know, it's not that I'm not comfortable, it's just that we're not like an official couple. Like, we're not like we've gone on dates, but we're not like dating like a couple like that, you know. So like, I guess I'd kind of let it turn into something that it wasn't. I kind of thought it was like, okay, we're at a bar just like BSing and just like talking about whatever kind of crap, you know. And like, no one's gonna remember this conversation, you know, because that often happens, that like nobody remembers what the heck we're doing, you know. Nobody remembers the night before because everybody was like plastered and like, you know, like unless I bring it up, most of the time most of my friends aren't gonna remember half the conversations we had. So usually I'm like, you know, and I'm not saying I was like trying to lie or whatever, but there was a lot of pressure behind that situation, because I was like, first of all, this other person is getting on everybody's nerves, so I kind of feel obligated to kind of intervene. And then second of all, now they're starting to put that pressure on me and start being annoying and irritating towards me. So then I kind of in turn tried to counter that by, you know, I don't know if I was embellishing a story. I would say I was. In all honesty, I was embellishing the story by leaving out details. Like, I was explaining my perspective of like the fantasy version of what I would like to have had happen in that dating ship kind of situation. But in reality, it's like the friendship that I had with that person, in reality, our friendship was not going to go in that direction unless we had like some conversation about it, which at that point we had not spoken about that. And it wasn't like in like it wasn't like on the radar that we were like talking about moving in together and getting more serious. We were kind of like in a friendship where we both liked each other, and things were kind of like stable, stagnant in that, and on that range, if that makes sense. So I mean, I try to make a practice of not lying to people, but at the same time, it's like I feel like that went, you know, it kind of backfired, because I was kind of like bullshitting one of my friends, and, you know, it turned into my friends eventually feeling like, well, maybe I'm not comfortable when I'm dating somebody to have them around, which I'm probably not like super confident about that kind of stuff, but also it's like I'm not that unconfident about that kind of stuff. So it was kind of like, once my friend mentioned that, I was like, dude, they're not gonna let it go, because like they keep asking and keep talking about it and keep mentioning it. But I wasn't like intending to be untruthful. I was mostly just intending to kind of firstly, diffuse like a stressful situation going on socially where the unhinged person was not leaving other people alone. And then second from that, I was trying to, you know, be maybe protective of my own ego, because this person started like, I don't want to say attacking me. It wasn't like as strong as like attacking, but it was like a mild version of like a mild attack on my ego of like how they started like coming at me about something. And so that kind of turned into me kind of like allowing people to believe that I was kind of in some relationship with somebody, in a way that I wasn't. Now, was I in a relationship with someone? It was a form of a relationship, yes. But we weren't that solid, like to the point that we were really gonna realistically move in together or be like long-term lovers and like start a life together with the two of us or whatever. Like, it was nothing on that level. It could have been if we were like talking about that and like trying to move in that direction, but like neither one of us really opened that door. We're kind of like, this is kind of cool where it's at, and we kept it like at that level for a really long time. So at this phase in that friendship with that person, it was just a friend that I had a really strong crush and liking for, and they kind of felt similarly, but we weren't a couple. And so when we talk about, consequences, those were kind of like feelings, behaviors, everything kind of wrapped into one, right? And then, I'd say the way that I created new consequences was kind of, with the disputation of beliefs and that whole process, I kind of came to terms with, I don't want the pressure of my friends feeling like I don't want, to invite this person around, or having to think of like, oh, if they do actually, opt in to an invitation and they do say, oh yeah, I do want to come and meet your friends and like hang out with you guys all together. I mean, are my friends going to be nosy and start asking a bunch of questions like, how'd you meet, where'd you meet, all that kind of stuff? Are they going to be like embarrassing, or are they going to act weird? Like, I didn't really know how they were going to react. And I'm like, well, if they think that me and this person are dating, and then they start seeing me with this person in front of them, and then it just, I was like, I don't want it to get to a point where it's like, oh, somebody met somebody that I'm dating, and then it's like, no, we're not dating, but it's like, but you said that you were. But I didn't really say it directly to them. I said it to somebody else. They overheard it, and they took it and ran with it and were very polite and congratulatory about it, and I just didn't correct them. I was just like, okay, but I also was drunk and kind of talking out of my ass. And so, that's kind of how the situation went. And so when it comes to like the whole disputation of beliefs and challenging my beliefs and creating new consequences, it's kind of like, I did kind of feel like I was being judged. That was kind of the main belief, that I felt like I was being judged, and like mildly that my ego was being a little bit bruised by this conversation. And so I kind of made it sound like something that it wasn't. And the way that I kind of, diffused that was mostly having to kind of, explain to my friends, but I never really explained too much further past that. I just mostly explained like, oh, like we're not dating, like we went on dates, but we're not like a couple. And then effective new beliefs, adopting implementation of new adaptive beliefs, just kind of like, because I don't know, it's kind of awkward for me with some of my friends to talk about like dating situations, because that's something that I don't really talk about with everybody. And so I've kind of noticed, there are some people that I don't want to talk about my dating life with. And there are some people that I feel a little more sensitive around if they are talking to me about dating someone. And then I just don't want to talk about it. So I kind of just mostly only talk about dating with certain friends in very small, intimate settings where it's not like groups of people and everybody kind of like chiming in with their energy and me not really knowing kind of how to interpret what one person's either thinking about what I'm saying or how this other person's reacting to what I'm saying with either their mannerisms or facial expressions or like if they seem interested in talking about it more or whatever. So that's kind of how I kind of notice that I'm like, okay, like, it's in a way that's kind of an adaptive belief for me is like, this is my comfort level. I don't really want to be talking about these situations when I'm drunk or when I'm in a setting where I'm like trying to talk about some sensitive issue of dating somebody. When I'm talking to somebody who's completely unhinged and trying to challenge me on things, it's kind of like that's not the setting to be talking about some kind of complicated dating situation, because it was complicated at that time, and not complicated because of the person, not complicated because of how they were being, but complicated like there were some dynamics of it that were a little bit complicated, like the non-monogamous part of it, the non exclusive part of it, the kind of other relationship status variables, and other variables that I don't really want to talk about, but there were a lot of variables involved that made it so it wasn't just a cut and dry like simple situation. And so this isn't really a good example because I feel like it's not like a full pattern. I mean, part of the pattern is just like how I address dating with people, and it's kind of just like a story, like of one situation that happened, but there was kind of a point where people kept asking me if I wanted to invite this person. They're more than welcome if you want to invite them or whatever. And so I kind of did. And then yeah, like that's kind of, I think I was able to kind of stop that conversation from getting out of hand, and I would hope that it didn't really ruin any kind of like trust in the friendship with somebody, because I wasn't trying to be like toxically lying or anything. It just kind of unfolded incorrectly, and I never really corrected it until it got to a point where I was like, they really think that I'm dating somebody right now. They think that I'm in a relationship with somebody that I'm not introducing them to. And these are people that I would hang out with on probably like almost every weekend. So it's kind of like, it's kind of weird. It's like, okay, you're seeing each other every weekend and we've never met this person, so it kind of got to a point where I was kind of like, oh, they just keep telling me I can invite them. And I kind of just casually was like, yeah, but I was like, I wasn't like too gutsy, and I wasn't like, yeah, I know you guys thought this, but I was just kind of bullshitting this other person in this scenario and didn't really mean for other people to like overhear it and like think that I'm kind of like doing something that I'm not. There was like a bit of pressure about it though, to have people kind of thinking that I'm kind of like in some kind of situation that I wasn't at that time. And so that's kind of the example that I wanted to give. It's not really a cut and dry example that kind of explains the ABC model in general, but it's kind of a situation that I've kind of had on my mind that I'm like, I could have probably handled that differently. But it kind of took me a while to come to all those terms with like, why did that happen? Why did that experience go that way? Like, what was it that led me to say that, you know? And it's kind of different. Like, sometimes I think when you say you're dating someone, it some people can take it to mean like you're exclusively dating someone in a monogamous relationship versus I went on some dates with this person and I'm still going on some dates with them, but we're not like, we haven't really established like what it is. And so like, I think I never really used labels. It's just kind of, I let maybe an assumption get out of hand. And I was being truthful. Like, I'm not trying to um like make excuses for what I said or did, but I'm just saying like I was trying to be truthful and like how I felt about that person. Like, I really was into them and did like them, and if they would have invited me to kind of want to take things to another level and like get a place together and stuff like that, I would have wanted to do that. That's something that I would have wanted, but I knew in reality I wasn't going to open that conversation with this person, and I knew in reality I wasn't ready to do that. um I don't really think realistically I would have jumped into that with them at that time right away, like a living together situation. And I also don't think they were trying for us to live together. um I just knew that they were trying to find a place to move to, but I don't think I was involved in that equation necessarily. If that makes sense. Like, they weren't like trying to decide based on what I might desire of them, or might prefer of them, or might, want for the relationship between the two of us. Like, I was not a variable in their moving situation. And so, um, like, and I did know that. Did I know that if it was going to unfold towards that direction? I kind of at that time did think it was going to unfold towards that direction, that like things were going to get deeper and more serious. I knew that there was potential for that to happen, but the more we kept kind of going on dates and meeting each other and talking about different stuff, uh, another situation came up where they kind of something just kind of happened. It wasn't like it was a big deal for me for like a day or two, maybe a week, that there was a scenario that came up with this person where I was kind of like, okay, I think I didn't like how they approached that situation, and I realized I had a hard time talking to this person about certain stuff, and I was kind of like, I don't think this is a good fit because I'm not too comfortable with like being too open with them about certain things, and I didn't think that was something I was going to be able to like work out with them. And at least not at that time. And then once that time passed with the situation that came up, I was kind of like over it, like it kind of rubbed me the wrong way, in a way that I was like, okay, like I don't really want to be pursuing this person in a serious way anymore. Because I was kind of gonna, I was potentially interested in pursuing something serious, and then once things started unfolding more and more, I realized I'm like, this probably isn't like the best fit necessarily. So once my friend, asked for the last time, they didn't say, oh, this is the last time I'm asking, but the time when I revealed to them that I wasn't actually, in fact, in a relationship with this person, because I knew that that's what they were thinking, because I let them think that, and they were being polite and open to letting me invite people over if I want to, and I'm glad that I know that that's like an option, but I don't really know. Um I don't know. I've kind of, you know, wanted to, maybe one of these days I'll circle back to it. I don't think I'm gutsy enough to bring it up and be like, oh, remember that time when you guys thought I was, that I let this kind of story get out of hand to like some point, because it was kind of like a fantasy world of like, oh, like if this could be this way, if I could kind of like be this way with this person, that would be ideal for me. If things could go this way, if it could be this way, that's kind of where my mind was. But in reality, things were not actively going towards that direction. They were kind of just steadily going. Just it was just kind of like a steady thing. Like things weren't like like elevating into us being a couple. They were kind of just staying kind of just like even. And so they went from even to like, okay, now we know we're just gonna stay friends. And then I think that's why I felt more comfortable just telling my friend, like, like we're not, we went on some dates, we're not a couple, because at that point I knew that we weren't gonna be a couple. That whatever was going on between us was not going to continue going on between us, other than just us kind of backing into a friendship. um but which is fine, it's still a deep friendship. But and a lot of times I have friendships, I'm part of a culture that has friendships with people in some ways that's not necessarily too distant, too closed minded. I don't always do the whole like monogamous exclusive thing. Like, I'm not really so into that. So it's kind of like a lot of times, you know, it's possible to have relationships with people, but they don't really look like other people's relationships. So sometimes it's like I will say that I'm dating somebody because I am dating somebody, but maybe they're also dating somebody. So it's kind of like that might not be clear, but it's also maybe not something I want to share with everybody I know. So it kind of just depends what's going on. But um yeah, with that, I don't think I did a good job at explaining all the ABC model, but that's kind of how I've reflected on the majority of the major points of that kind of situation, where it's like, yeah, I did kind of screw up and let things get out of hand. Um, and it wasn't. I don't think it was like a huge deal. I hope it didn't seem like it was a huge deal, but um, I just um, it was weird. It was just weird for me. In all honesty, it was just a weird experience. So I don't know what else to say about that, um, but yeah, like mostly it was, working on patterns of beliefs um, involving, if I feel like someone's being judgmental towards me, patterns of beliefs of who I feel like I'm pretty safe sharing stuff with, certain things with, and then, you know, I guess patterns of behaviors related to, if I feel like my ego is getting kind of wounded, you know, in a social setting, like how do I address that? Like, what do I say? What do I do? Um, you know, um, I could have easily just backed off the conversation and been like, I don't want to talk about this. Let's talk about something else. But I instead leaned into it. Um, and I don't know. It is what it is. I can't really go back in time and undo anything. But it's definitely not something that I plan to make a pattern out of, embellishing on things. But I was kind of just surprised a little bit that anybody remembered, because usually when I'm just kind of like shooting the shit with friends at a bar, like, we usually don't follow up about things. We're just kind of like, oh, that's just what we were like talking about, and then we just let that go. So and usually I am in a mood to just kind of sit and talk about things, and a lot of times my friends are in the mood to like dance and like run around and like drink and stuff, and usually I would rather just sit down at a coffee shop and have a conversation. And so I was kind of getting some of my needs met in that setting, even though it wasn't ideal. Like, we weren't having like a very authentic conversation, because it was more of like me being defensive, answering this person's questions. But yeah, I I'm not sure if I have too much more to say about this topic. But with that, thank you for listening.